Talk Radio.
Hello, world. Welcome once again to Tuesday Talk with Key West Lou. I am your host, Louis Patrone. Another crazy week, another wild week, another bad week. I wish one week I could come on the show and say something good happened, but there's very little good happening in the world, internationally, nationally, statewide, locally. Everything seems to be screwing up, and it's making people more fearful, I believe. They're worried about not only their pocketbook, but their safety now. Before I go any further, though, if you want to call in, the number is 646-478-5731. The number's on the screen in front of you. Again, 646-478-5731. I want to speak first about an issue which is bothering me, and I believe bothering you also. The disintegration of our legal system. I repeat, the disintegration of our legal system, the breakdown of our legal system. And I'm going to address this issue with specific examples. Let's start with Ferguson, Missouri. My God, what can I tell you about Ferguson? It is more than 2 months since the shooting, since the gentleman died, and there is no indictment yet. The grand jury hasn't reported. Even if there's not going to be an indictment, the grand jury should report. And it isn't the people that are sitting on the grand jury that's holding this thing up. It's the prosecutor, because the prosecutors control everything with regard to the grand jury. So what have we got here? We've got a community that's going out and protesting almost every night on the streets because the Afro-Americans, the black people of Ferguson, don't think they are getting a fair shake. And they're not, because the law says if you present it to a grand jury, you have them report out. You don't take 2 months. You don't take more than 2 months. You're permitted to, but it doesn't happen very often. This is cut and dry. You present the evidence. The police officer's either guilty or is charged with a crime, or he's not. You get it over with. You don't leave it hanging like they're doing there, because it's only making things worse. It's raising temperatures. It is aggravating the people of Ferguson. I have people all over that listen to this show, read my blog, and I have a gentleman. He's a loyal follower of the blog, and he listens to the show from St. Louis. He wrote me this morning, and he said, Lou, if this grand jury, number one, does not come back and charge the police officer, he says the town's going to explode. There will be an explosion. And I'm going to tell you right now, the people do not expect the grand jury to come back with an indictment. And he says, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think you could see the community burned to the ground that bad. I fear for things like this. You fear for things like this. And why is this happening? Because there's a breakdown in the legal system in Ferguson. Number one, the man probably shouldn't have been shot. Because there's a police officer involved, there's conflicting stories. The grand jury has this issue for over 2 months. Nothing happens. I don't understand this. And this is a perfect example of a breakdown in our legal system. Now, let me go to Mississippi. Mississippi is a terrific state. They have always been a leader in civil rights, in doing what is proper, and doing it the legal way. I mean, we can remember all the lynchings that went on there, the shootings back in the 1950s and 1960s, the churches which were burned down. Great state, Mississippi, the all-American state. Well, they're at it again. And I would expect them to be at it because this is the way it is in Mississippi. Here's what's happening now in Mississippi. You're arrested. And the county, by the way, is Scott County. In Scott County, if you're arrested, you're brought before the judge, and he sends you to jail. You're just sent to jail. You don't get appointed a lawyer because they can't afford a public defender system, and you sit in jail for as long as they want you to sit in jail. You don't go in front of a judge anymore. You never get indicted. You are never given the right to an attorney. Now, the Constitution says you have a right to counsel, you have a right to a speedy trial, you have a right to a bail hearing. You never get the bail hearing. You never come before the judge again, and you're never appointed an attorney. You just sit in jail. You are frozen in time in your cell. There is a legal black hole there, and if you're arrested in Scott County, you fall into it. So they asked the judge. They said, Judge, why is this going on here in your county? He says, well, it's really not a bad thing. He says, the public defender here, the county has to pay for it. And we're a poor county. We can't afford the public defender system. So when these guys get arrested, we put them in jail. And we let them sit there for up to a year without a lawyer, without coming before the judge, and without a bail hearing. And then when we think they've been punished enough, we set them free. It's a good system. It works, and we can afford it, okay? Would you believe what I just told you? You get arrested in Scott County, you go to jail, you don't see the judge, you don't see the lawyer, and you don't get any bail set for up to a year until somebody says, let's let this guy out now. And that's not the way things should be done. The American Civil Liberties Union recently filed a class action against Scott County saying this is wrong. You can't do this. And so there's going to be some interesting court proceedings here over the next year or two. But until something happens, that's the way business is done in Scott County in the state of Mississippi. Now, we can sit back and say, well, that's the South, and that's Mississippi. And you know how it is in the South. They've been doing this for over 100 years, these kind of things. That's what we would expect. That doesn't happen, fortunately, in the North. Well, let me tell you what happened in New York City. It happens in the North. The right to a speedy trial, a constitutionally guaranteed right. I'm going to tell you the story of Khalif Browder, 16 years old. He was arrested in March 2010. He just got out of jail in 2013, okay? He spent almost 3 years in jail. Now, here's what happened. He lived in the Bronx. He was walking home after a show with a buddy of his. A police car pulls up. Someone sitting in the back seat and says, that's him. Someone who claimed they had been robbed of a backpack. And Khalif says, not me. I ain't got any backpack. I was at the movies with my buddy. Well, the police don't believe him. They arrest him, okay? And he has a lawyer, and he goes before a judge, and the judge sets bail at $3,000. This is an Afro-American, a black from Bronx County. His family can't afford $3,000. That's more money they probably earn in a year. So Khalif has to sit in jail until his case comes up for trial. Well, every time his case is on the calendar for trial, the prosecutor says, the district attorney, I need more time, Your Honor. I'd like an adjournment. And they keep adjourning his case. It's a week at a time, but when you adjourn for a week in New York City in criminal court, that means it's going to take 2, 3, 4 months because they've got to reschedule and they have so many cases it takes that much longer. So Khalif keeps coming in front of the court and they keep adjourning his case, and now he's in jail. And he doesn't ask for the adjournment, nor does his attorney. He's in jail for almost 3 years. Also, during the time he's in jail, and I don't know why, he's in solitary confinement. For more than 800 days, Khalif is in solitary confinement on that great prison in New York City, Rikers Island. It's a zoo, friends. It's terrible. It's a cellar. It's not the place for anyone to be. But he's in solitary confinement. Maybe he's better off in solitary confinement for those 3 years. Finally, the prosecutor, the district attorney, says, I don't believe the witness who said he did it. So they drop the charges. But he has spent 3 years in jail in solitary confinement because his case kept getting adjourned. Now, that's wrong on the prosecutor's part. I don't know what the hell this guy's personal attorney did, what Khalif's attorney did. He should have been on the table yelling and screaming, I want a trial, this is wrong. And I'm going to tell you someone else who is responsible here, and this shows the breakdown in the system, the judge. Because the judge or judges see this case keep coming up. They see it on the docket in front of them. They've got the numbers, and they keep adjourning it. They don't care. No one pays attention to these things. If the judge doesn't pay attention, who's going to pay attention, all right? And so Khalif's Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial is violated. And this happened, my friends, in the North Country, in New York City. It happens everywhere. It's another example of the disintegration of the legal system, the breakdown of the legal system. Again, the dike that had a hole in it and the water was dripping out has cracked, and I fear that the walls are going to come tumbling down. Let's go to Detroit now. City in bankruptcy. They've got a problem in Detroit. The poor people can't pay their water bill. I'm laughing as I say this because you know the story. It's ludicrous. They can't pay their water bill. And once a person owes $150, the water's shut off by the water company because they haven't paid their water bill. Now, these are poor Afro-Americans. No one with money lives in Detroit anymore. Its days of glory are gone. And these are run-down neighborhoods. These people are hand to mouth. And since the first of the year alone, so we understand, 50,000 homes have had their water turned off. They're doing it at the rate now of 400 households a day. So we're into bankruptcy. And the federal judge, his job is not to protect these people necessarily. His job is to collect money, protect money for the creditors, the people Detroit owes money to. And in order to do that, he's got to get the debtors, people who owe on their water bills are considered debtors, to pay up. So then he has some money to parcel out to the big creditors who are owed millions of dollars. Recognize now what I am going to say. Everyone in this bankruptcy who's owed money is going to be lucky to get 10 cents on the dollar because that's how these things work out. At best, 20 cents, but it'll probably be 10 cents on the dollar. And for the total amount of these water bills, it comes to less than 1 penny they would be losing. Instead of getting 10 cents on the dollar, they may get 9.7 cents on the dollar. All right? There isn't that much involved here. It's really a non-entity in the overall picture. To make it even worse, these are the little guys who are having their water shut off. But the big guys aren't. You have an automobile company that owes in the six figures. They haven't paid their bill. And the city of Detroit is not pursuing them. They don't get their water turned off. And their Coliseum, where they play their sports games, they owe six-figure money, all right? And no one's pursuing them, and the games go on, the sports get paid. And they keep using the water, and they're not paying for their water. But the little guy who owes $150 and probably doesn't have a job, he gets his water turned off. Well, the United Nations about 3 months ago, because they went to the United Nations, the black people, and I don't blame them, embarrass our country, embarrass Detroit, properly so in this case. The United Nations said there is a fundamental right to water. It is a human right. And so advised the judge and everyone else. Well, a group got together of the people who had their water turned off, and they went before the judge, and they said, we want you to stop this mass water turnoffs of the private homes of people in this community because people believe water is a fundamental right, okay, basic. You need air and you need water to live. Can you argue with me? Air and water. Well, the judge ruled last week. He ruled. Understand again, he really isn't responsible under the law, and this is an archaic law. I don't think we've had 10 municipal bankruptcies in the history of this country. So, and Detroit's obviously the biggest. We are testing the law involved. We're testing the statutes involved. Really, for the first time, we are making law. And what does this judge do when he's got the issue of, should I stop them from turning water off? He says, there is no fundamental right to water service. There is no fundamental right to water. Now, the issue before him was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he said, liberty doesn't apply, and here's why. Pursuit of happiness doesn't apply, and here's why. His decision never mentioned life, though. And that's one of the guarantees, my friends, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because without water, there ain't no life. That simple. Again, This is an example of the disintegration in our system. The judge had to go out of the box on this case, had to go beyond the statute and make a decision, and a right decision, and he failed to do so. Now, I want to go to the Supreme Court of the United States. I have been saying, I've been suggesting, I've been discussing on my television show for the last couple of years, on this Black Talk radio show, and in my daily blog, I have been discussing some of the decisions the court is making, the Supreme Court of the United States. I have not been happy with many of the decisions, and I've got to believe most of you have not been happy. One of the worst decisions I've ever seen come down is that a corporation is a person. Isn't that wonderful? And if it's a person, then it's free to contribute in political elections as much as they want. So now you've got corporations and rich people contributing millions of dollars, not $1 million, $2 million, some people $100 million. There are the filthy rich out there, okay? And they're contributing this kind of money. And how can you and I, with your $10, $25, hopefully $50 or $100, compete when it comes to election day? They are getting ready and are buying elections this way. Okay, so I don't agree with that decision. Some of you will. The Republicans like it. They say everybody's got a right to throw money in. Not this way. This is wrong. Again, this is buying elections. Yesterday, the Supreme Court, in effect, made a decision affecting gay marriages, sex marriages, same-sex marriages, same-sex marriages. It didn't really hear the case. Here's what happened. There are trial courts in the federal system. Then there's a court of appeals called the Circuit Court, and then above is the United States Supreme Court. Well, 5 states banned same-sex marriage. They passed laws saying you can't have same-sex marriage. That was Utah, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Virginia. An appeal took place. The case went to court, and the circuit courts involved with each of these 5 states said, no, unconstitutional. There is a right to same-sex marriage, and they threw the bans out, okay? And people in those states, they said, could marry. Well, when there is a conflict, this is the normal procedure, when there are issues that are rumbling in the circuit courts, the United States Supreme Court can do one of 2 things. They can hear the case, or they can just say, we're not going to hear the case. And by not hearing the case, then the law of the circuit courts, the decision becomes the law of the land. So in those states, Utah, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Virginia, the law of the land now is and will be for all time that same-sex marriage is legal. The problem, and what I am upset about, is the Supreme Court should have heard the whole case, should have dealt with the issue of same-sex marriage, because there are now a total, with those 5 states, of 29 states that permit same-sex marriage. There's still 20 of them sitting out there that don't permit it. And by the time those 20 get to court and everything gets resolved, it's going to be 2 or 3 years at the least before we have a national rule, a national law saying same-sex marriage is legal. The court could have heard the whole kit and caboodle. They did not have to do it piecemeal, because there is going to be trouble down the line. Mississippi, I talked about them already, with keeping people in jail without going before a judge or getting a lawyer for a year. Mississippi says they're going to fight this issue to the death, and they probably will. They're still fighting the Civil War. And so this is what's wrong. The court should have taken the whole issue, the national issue, and decided it and cut out the procedural aspects, because they can do it. The Supreme Court can hear any case they want in any fashion they want at any time. They are the supreme being. They make the rules. They're not bound by any of the, subordinate rules that apply to their court system. They can do anything they want. It's legal and proper. And again, I believe and I fear that the same-sex marriage issue, it's going to be bouncing around for the next 20, 25 years, just like abortion. We're not solving the problem. We are not solving the problem. Of course, you read in the paper today, everybody's saying this was a victory for same-sex marriage. It wasn't a victory. Sure, it said what happened in those 5 states in the lower court is the law of those states now. But what about those 20 that are left? It's going to be hard to bring them into the fold. And that, my friends, is an example of the disintegration, the breakdown in our legal system, because we have a Supreme Court, conservative, 5-4, that is making bum decisions. I don't understand where they're coming from with these decisions. What they are doing is ruling in favor of the 1% as opposed to the 99%, in favor of the religious right as opposed to the rest of the country. And it's not right, and it's happening, and that shows a breakdown in the system. Now, when you take all these things and put them together, can you wonder why people get upset with what's happening in this country? And you can't keep doing this. People are going to protest. You're going to have demonstrations. Somebody's going to get hurt because somebody throws a stone, a policeman shoots somebody, and now, at some point, we're really going to have a big battle, and it's going to be the shame of our country that something like this is going to happen. And I believe that a primary reason for it, there are other reasons, is the breakdown in our legal system. Okay, we're going over to Hong Kong now. Hong Kong. You know there are mobs in the street. They've been there for 2 or 3 weeks now, primarily young. And they're protesting. They want more freedom in Hong Kong. They want more separation from China. All right, no problem. This is what they want. They should do it. The problem is this. After 2 or 3 weeks of protests, in the last 48 hours, that's all, in the last 48 hours, it has come out. It's been suggested, it's been said, that the United States and Wall Street, that's the way they put it, are responsible for the organized chaos existing in Hong Kong, okay? The reason being that our government and corporate America, when you talk Wall Street, the banks, and corporate America, want to bring forth a collapse of China's political order. Remember, China has taken much business from this country. We want to get that business back. I'm not saying they're going to produce it in the United States. They may go to do it in Ireland or something, but the point is they want to get the businesses out of China. They want to break China economically. So it's said that behind the scenes the United States is supporting with dollars, and Wall Street, corporate America, is supporting with dollars, cash. And the other group that's supporting this whole thing is the media, radio and television, our radio and television. And it makes sense to me if it's true, because our media, radio and television, the newspapers, are now no longer owned by media people. Radio people don't run the radio. TV people don't own and run TV stations. Newspapers aren't run by newspaper people anymore. They're owned by corporate America, okay, or the very rich. And the corporate America and the very rich are using the media to accomplish whatever they want in life for their benefit, for the 1% and not the 99%. I want to say something also. Let me tell you this, what's come out in the last 2 days. The people opposing the students in the streets are not the army of China yet. At some point it will come. If they do, they'll get rid of the students. It always works that way. That's history. Look what happened in Hungary in 1957. The Russians threw in the tanks. The revolution was over. However, residents of Hong Kong and business owners in Hong Kong are the ones coming out in the street and confronting the protesters. You hear me? The residents of Hong Kong and business owners are coming out in the street. The underlying story being those protesters aren't all from Hong Kong. They're being bussed in effect. I'm using that terminology. Again, it's claimed U.S. cash from the United States, and media support is doing that. There's a group. Remember we had Occupy Wall Street? It's called Occupy Central in Hong Kong. This is funded with U.S. dollars. This is the premise of the last 48 hours. Occupy Central in Hong Kong is being funded with U.S. monies. And it really is not. Occupy Central is not representative of the people of Hong Kong. I want to say one more thing on this issue. Remember Egypt. Remember Mubarak. Mubarak was our friend for 30 years. He became the friend of Israel because he was our friend. And when the revolution started in the street, it wasn't really a revolution. The kids went out, the people went out, and they wanted a better way, and we don't want you for our president anymore. And I'm not saying he was the best of guys, but he kept the Middle East under control. He was a contributing factor, and he was our friend. And he was Israel's friend. And what happened? We immediately turned on Mubarak. Hillary Clinton says, we support democracy. Obama said, we support democracy. This was within a matter of days. Wrong. You've got to remember who your friends are in this world, and you should not be quick to jump to the other side, because revolution is in the air throughout the world. It's in the air in the Middle East. It's in the air in the Far East, in Central America, in South America. Wait till it gets in the air here. We have it. People argue and everything else. We really haven't gone to the streets that much. But if the government, corporate America, banks keep screwing around with the American people, we could have the same scenario that's going on in Hong Kong today. All right, now I'm going to talk about government waste. I haven't talked about government waste in a long time. I love it. They want to cut Social Security. They want to cut Medicare. They want to cut breakfast for children. And yet our government, excuse the way I'm going to put it, pisses money away. There is the National Institute of Health, the National Institute of Health. And they're an agency of the United States government, and they're the ones that take the money and spend it all over the country, spread it out, to have studies done on important issues. You know what the important issue of the day is, my friends? We studied that it's been financed. $500,000 is gone to an organization called, actually $466,642. It's gone to an organization called McGee Women's Research Institute and Foundation to do a 4-year study. And here it comes. This is the issue. Why obese girls have a hard time getting dates. That's the issue. That's the question to be resolved. Why obese girls have a hard time getting dates. You don't need to spend $500,000 to know why. The question answers itself. And fat boys, obese boys have the same problem getting dates. What a stupid study to make. What a waste of $500,000. In a day and age when every penny counts, when 99% of the people are hurting bad, we're doing a $500,000 study why obese girls have a hard time getting dates. One further thing, we're coming close to the end here. Our congressmen get money from Israel. Senators and House of Representative people get money from Israel. There's a major Jewish organization called American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC it's called. And I think when they give the money the way they do, it's not through lobbyists necessarily, but it goes directly to the senator and congressman. These guys should be lobbyists. I'm talking about Joe Lieberman, who gets over $1 million. John McCain, $750,000. Mitch McConnell, $450,000. Harry Reid, $179,000. Mark Kirk, $458,000. Eric Cantor, $119,000. Nancy Pelosi, $83,000. All our representatives who take this kind of money from Israel should register themselves as lobbyists for Israel. That's the show for this week. I thank you for joining me. It's fun doing the show, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. You come back, so I know you do. The show is archived, as you know, and can be heard immediately after the show at any time you wish to listen to it. And I know most of the listeners listen to the archive version or later in the week on Facebook or Twitter. I wrote a book. I keep telling you, The World Upside Down. Think of buying it. It's on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, The World Upside Down. If you like the show, you'll love the book. If you don't like this show, don't buy the book. You'll hate it. Thank you again for joining me. I look forward to being with you again next week.